Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
Leo, if you'll be a girl for a week, I promise we'll be the most famous people at Northwood High. You know, it's funny how a life can pivot on a single, ridiculous sentence. Mine did. It wasn't a declaration of war or a doctor's grim diagnosis. It was a half-joking, half-insane proposal from my older sister, Maya, spoken in a room that still smelled of fresh paint and cardboard. Leo, if you'll be a girl for a week, I promise we'll be the most famous people at Northwood High. I was on my knees, wrestling with a box of old video games, the tape screaming in protest as I pulled it apart. The words hit the air and just hung there. They were so out of place, so utterly bizarre, that my brain took a full 5 seconds to even process them. I stopped pulling, the tape gun still in my hand, and slowly turned my head. Maya was standing in the doorway of my new, depressingly beige bedroom. She wasn't smiling. She was holding a large sketchbook, the kind she used for her grand, elaborate plans, and her eyes had the intense, laser-focused gleam they got when she was about to do something either brilliant or catastrophic. Usually, it was a bit of both. I started, my voice cracking a little. Did you just say what I think you said? She took a step into the room, her confidence filling the empty space that my unpacked boxes couldn't. I did. It's the perfect plan. A social experiment, a Trojan horse. We're new here. Leo, we're nobody. This town, this school. It's a fishbowl. If we don't make a splash, we'll just sink to the bottom and become part of the gravel. I just stared at her. My sister, the aspiring director, the social strategist, the girl who saw life as a movie she was meant to script. Moving to Northwood after our parents' divorce had been her idea. A fresh start, she'd called it. I was starting to think she meant a fresh start for her next big production, and I was her unwilling star. A girl I finally managed, the word feeling foreign and absurd on my tongue. You want me to pretend to be a girl? She flipped open her sketchbook to a page covered in notes and little drawings. I could see names and timelines scrawled in her aggressive handwriting. Not just any girl, she corrected, tapping a sketch of a long-haired, demure-looking figure. You'll be Leah, our cousin, from Chicago. She's shy, a little reserved, incredibly sweet. She's here to stay with us for a while to adjust to small-town life. It's the perfect backstory, untraceable, sympathetic, and intriguing. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I could feel the blood rushing to my ears, a hot, prickly sensation that drowned out the quiet hum of the house. This was beyond one of her usual schemes, like the time she convinced our old school's principal to fund a documentary that was really just an elaborate prank on the football team. This was different. This felt like a line we were not supposed to cross. Maya, you're insane, I said. Standing up, my own voice sounded distant. Absolutely, certifiably insane. There is no way, not in a million years. She didn't flinch. She just raised an eyebrow. A gesture she'd perfected that could make you feel like the most foolish, short-sighted person on the planet. Think about it. Leo, she said, her voice dropping to a low, persuasive hum. You know how these small towns work. Cliques are set in stone. Reputations are made in the first week. You walk in there as Leo, the quiet new kid who likes video games and keeps to himself, and that's who you'll be for the next 2 years. Invisible. She didn't have to say it so bluntly. I already knew. It had been the story of my life. I wasn't a jock, wasn't a brain, wasn't a rebel. I was just Leo, the guy who was easy to forget. The thought of starting over at a new high school, a junior in a sea of faces that had known each other since kindergarten, filled me with a familiar, cold dread. I'd spent the entire summer worrying about it, imagining myself eating lunch alone, being the last one picked for any team in gym class, walking the halls like a ghost. Maya saw the flicker of fear in my eyes. She always did. She moved closer, her tone softening. But Leah will be different. She'll be the mysterious new girl. Everyone will want to know her. The girls will want to be her friend. The guys will want to ask her out. And since she's my cousin, I'll be right there with her. We'll be a package deal. We'll be instantly interesting. By the time the week is over and Leah has to go back to Chicago, we'll already be in. We'll have connections. We'll be known. Her words painted a picture that was both terrifying and strangely, deeply alluring. The idea of being someone else, someone noticed, someone who wasn't just blending into the background. It was a powerful fantasy. But the price was my own identity, my own gender. The internal debate began almost immediately, a chaotic war in my head. This is the stupidest idea I have ever heard. But what if it works? People will find out. I'll be a laughingstock for the rest of my life. But what if they don't? For 1 week, I could be someone else. I looked around the half-empty room, at the boxes that represented my fragmented life. My dad was back in the city. My mom was downstairs trying to figure out which remote controlled the new TV, and I was here, in a new town where I knew exactly 0 people. The loneliness of it all felt like a physical weight on my chest. Maya wasn't just offering a plan. She was offering an escape from being me. Why me, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You could just make up a story about a cousin coming to visit. You don't need me to actually be her. It has to be believable, she insisted. People need to see her, talk to her, interact with her. Otherwise, she's just a rumor. You have the right build for it. Leo, you're slim. You don't have a super deep voice yet. Your features are, well, they're not overly masculine. We can work with you. A backhanded compliment if I'd ever heard one. But she had a point. I'd never been the most athletic or brawny guy. I was lanky, with fine-boned features I'd inherited from our mother. I'd always hated it, wished for a stronger jaw or broader shoulders. Now my sister was telling me those same features were an asset for a plan that involved me wearing a dress. The irony was suffocating. I can't, I said, shaking my head. More to convince myself than her. I can't walk like a girl or talk like a girl. I wouldn't know how to do my hair or makeup or, any of it. That's what this week is for, she said, her eyes lighting up again. She gestured around the room. We have 5 days before school starts. 5 days for a complete transformation. A training camp. I'll teach you everything. I've already done the research. I've watched hours of tutorials. I have a whole wardrobe planned out. It's all in the sketchbook. She was so prepared, so confident. It was like she'd been planning this for months. Not just since we'd moved. The sheer force of her will was like a tide, pulling me along. And then she delivered the final, killer line, the one that sealed my fate. Just 1 week. Leo, 7 days, that's all I'm asking. You'll be safe. You'll be Leah, and I'll be right there with you. Every second, your bodyguard, your guide, your director. Please, do this for me. For us. She looked at me, and for a second, the master strategist was gone, replaced by my sister, the sister who had always looked out for me, who had stood up to bullies for me in middle school, who had helped me with my homework when I was struggling, the one who was probably just as scared as I was about being the new kids. I looked at the open box of my old life, and then at her, offering me a script for a new one. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, But now it was mixed with something else, a flicker of wild, reckless curiosity. What would it be like to see the world through another person's eyes, to live, just for a week, completely outside the confines of being Leo? I swallowed hard, the sound loud in the quiet room, and I nodded. The next morning, Maya's campaign began with the kind of ruthless efficiency a drill sergeant would admire. She woke me at 7 a.m., not with a gentle shake, but by ripping my blankets off and declaring, "Operation Leah is a go. Bathroom now." The first stage of my transformation was, in her words, creating a blank canvas. This apparently meant systematically removing every trace of masculinity from my body that wasn't hidden by clothes. It started with my legs. She handed me a can of scented shaving cream in a pink, multi-bladed razor that looked like a futuristic weapon. I'd never shaved anything but the pathetic peach fuzz on my upper lip. The idea of putting a razor to my shins was terrifying. "I'm going to cut myself," I protested, holding the razor like it was a live grenade. "You'll be fine," she said, completely unsympathetic. "Warm water first, short strokes. Don't press too hard. Go on." I sat on the edge of the tub, the warm spray from the shower head hitting my legs. The shaving cream foamed up, cool and smooth against my skin. Smelling faintly of coconut and vanilla, I took a deep breath and made the first pass. The razor glided upward, leaving a perfectly smooth, pale path in the white foam. It was surprisingly easy, and the sensation was bizarre. I'd had hairy legs for years. Seeing them bare was like looking at a stranger's limbs attached to my body when I was done, and had rinsed and dried them. I couldn't stop touching them. My skin felt impossibly sleek, soft and sensitive. The fabric of my pajama pants, which I'd never even noticed before, felt strangely rough as it brushed against them. But the shaving was just the warm-up. The main event was my eyebrows. Maya came at me with a pair of tweezers that looked like tiny surgical instruments. "Don't move," she commanded. "Wait, what are you doing?" I yelped, leaning back. "Your eyebrows are too boyish," she said, studying my face with intense concentration. "They need an arch, a shape. It will soften your whole face." For the next 10 minutes, I endured a special kind of torture. Each pluck was a sharp, stinging pinch that made my eyes water. It hurt more than any scraped knee or twisted ankle I'd ever had. "This is worse than gym class," I grumbled, wincing as she zeroed in on another stray hair. "Beauty is pain," she chirped, completely unfazed. When she was finally satisfied, she handed me a mirror. My eyebrows were neater, thinner, with a gentle curve that I hadn't known was possible. And she was right. It did change my face. My eyes looked bigger, my forehead less severe. It was a subtle but profound difference. The final step of the day was skincare. My routine had always consisted of soap and water. Maya introduced me to a bewildering arsenal of bottles and tubs: cleanser, toner, moisturizer, exfoliator, and a green goop face mask that made me look like a B-movie monster. As I sat there with the mask tightening on my skin, feeling ridiculous, I had to admit, it was also kind of relaxing. My skin, which was usually an afterthought, was being pampered. It felt tingly and clean. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt like I was in a different body. My face felt tight and smooth. My legs, wrapped in the clean sheets, felt so slick it was almost distracting. The physical changes were just beginning, but they were already messing with my head. The sensations were alien, but not entirely unpleasant. They were interesting, and that, more than anything, scared me. The next day, Maya unveiled Leah's wardrobe. She had laid it all out on her bed, a carefully curated collection she must have bought with her summer job savings. It was a sea of soft fabrics and gentle colors. There was a pale blue pleated skirt, an ivory-colored knit sweater that looked incredibly soft, a pair of dark denim skinny jeans, and a few simple, long-sleeved t-shirts. Next to them were the accessories: a simple silver necklace, a pair of small pearl-like earrings clip-ons, thank God, and a pair of stylish, low-heeled ankle boots. But my eyes were drawn to the items that felt the most forbidden, the most transformative: the underwear. There was a stack of simple, comfortable-looking cotton panties in pastel shades, and next to them 2 bras. They weren't lacy or extravagant. They were plain, t-shirt-style bras, one white and one nude, but they held an almost totemic power. They were the undeniable symbol of femininity. Maya picked one up. "This is a padded A cup," she explained matter-of-factly, as if she were discussing hardware. "It'll just give you a little bit of shape under the sweater. Nothing crazy." My mouth was dry. I just nodded, unable to speak. "All right, time to try on the first outfit," she announced. "Let's go with the skirt and the sweater." Changing in my room, with the door closed, felt like a clandestine operation. The panties went on first. The soft, stretchy cotton felt so different from my usual boxers, less restrictive, more present. Then came the bra. I fumbled with the clasp at the back, my fingers feeling clumsy and thick. It took me 3 tries to get the tiny hooks and eyes to connect. The band felt tight around my ribs, the straps digging slightly into my shoulders. The padded cups felt strange and empty against my flat chest, a hollow promise of a shape I didn't have. Next were the stockings. Maya had chosen sheer, nude-colored ones as I carefully rolled them up my newly smooth legs. A full-body shiver ran through me. The feeling of the silky nylon sliding against my skin was electric, an intensely tactile sensation that made every nerve ending stand on end. It was like my legs were suddenly in high definition. I pulled the sweater over my head. It was soft and slightly fitted, hugging my torso in a way my usual baggy t-shirts never did. Then the skirt. I zipped it up, and the fabric flared out around my hips. Light and airy, it felt liberating. There was a sense of freedom in it that was completely unexpected. I put on the ankle boots, which gave me a slight, unfamiliar lift, and then took a deep, shaky breath. "Ready," Maya called from the other side of the door. "I guess," I mumbled. I opened the door and stepped out. Maya's eyes scanned me from head to toe, her expression critical. "Okay, not bad for a first try," she said. "The clothes fit, but your posture's all wrong. You're standing like a boy who's been forced into a skirt." She was right. I was hunched over, my shoulders slumped, my hands shoved awkwardly into imaginary pockets. "This feels weird," I said, tugging at the hem of the sweater. "Everything is so close to my skin. I can feel the bra, the stockings, everything." "That's the point," she said with a mischievous grin. "It's different. Isn't it different in a good way?" I didn't answer, because the terrifying truth was, a small part of me thought it was, the softness of the sweater, the swish of the skirt against my legs, the strange, protected feeling of being so encased in layers of soft fabric. It was overwhelming, but not entirely bad. The next 2 days were a blur of lessons in femininity. Maya was a relentless teacher. Walking, she'd command. As I clomped across the living room, "Your steps are too long, too heavy. Think smaller, lighter, your hips. Leo, let them move a little. Don't walk like a soldier." "Sitting," she'd correct. As I flopped onto the couch with my knees apart, legs together, always, Either cross them at the ankle or the knee and sit up straight, shoulders back. It makes the bra fit better. Talking, she'd coach, making me repeat phrases over and over. Your voice is fine, but you end your sentences with a downward inflection. It's definitive, masculine. Try to end with a slight upward tilt, a little softer, and don't talk so loud, project less. I felt like an actor rehearsing for the most difficult role of their life. At first, it was all mechanical and clumsy. I moved like a badly programmed robot. I'd forget to keep my knees together when I sat, or I'd answer her in my normal, flat voice. But slowly, painstakingly, things began to shift. The movement started to feel less like a performance and more like a second skin. I found a rhythm in the shorter, lighter steps. I automatically crossed my legs when I sat down. The higher, softer voice began to come more naturally, especially when I wasn't thinking about it. And that was the scariest part. The moments when I would catch myself in a reflection in the dark screen of the TV or a window and see a posture that wasn't mine. A tilt of the head that felt learned but was becoming instinctive. The line between Leo and the character of Leah was starting to blur, and I wasn't sure I knew how to draw it again. On the 5th day, the day before school started, it was time for the final, most crucial step, the head. Maya sat me down in front of her vanity mirror, which was covered in a dizzying array of brushes, pencils, and palettes. First, she placed the wig on my head. It wasn't a cheap, shiny party store wig. She'd ordered a high-quality one online. It was a beautiful, shoulder-length style in a warm brown, similar to my own hair color, but with soft, natural-looking waves. The weight of it on my head was immediate and transformative. Suddenly, I had hair brushing against my cheeks, tickling the back of my neck. When I turned my head, it swished. It was an entirely new sensory input. Then came the makeup. She was surprisingly gentle, her fingers light as she applied the foundation. The cool liquid felt strange on my skin, and the little sponge she used to blend it tickled. She used a bit of concealer under my eyes, a touch of contour to soften my jawline, and a dusting of pink blush on my cheeks. "Okay, close your eyes," she instructed. I felt the delicate brush of an eyeshadow applicator on my eyelids, then the fine sharp tip of an eyeliner pencil tracing a thin line just above my lashes. It was an incredible act of trust, letting her come so close to my eyes with something so sharp. A coat of mascara followed, making my eyelashes feel thick and heavy. Finally, she swiped a layer of soft, pink lip gloss across my lips. It was sticky and sweet. "Okay," she said, her voice hushed with anticipation. "You can open them." I took a breath and opened my eyes. And I didn't recognize myself. The person staring back at me from the mirror was not Leo. Not even Leo in a wig and makeup. It was someone else entirely. It was a girl. A pretty girl. Her eyes, framed by the dark liner and long lashes, looked huge and expressive. Her skin was flawless and smooth. Her cheekbones, highlighted by the blush, looked softer, and her lips had a gentle rosy shine. The wavy brown hair framed a face that was delicate, vulnerable. It was a face that made me feel a surge of something I couldn't name. It was a strange mix of protectiveness and recognition. It was as if I was meeting a part of myself I never knew existed. Is this really me?" I whispered, my voice coming out in the soft, higher register she'd taught me. It sounded right coming from the girl in the mirror. Maya was standing behind me, her reflection smiling in the mirror. "That," she said, her voice full of pride, "is Leah." I couldn't look away. I just stared at Leah. I tilted her head. She tilted hers. I gave a small, tentative smile. The girl in the mirror smiled back. a sweet, shy expression that seemed completely genuine. And the most terrifying part of all, I didn't hate it. I didn't feel revulsion or disgust. I felt calm. The reflection looking back at me was gentle and non-threatening. All my life, I had been trying to live up to some vague, unspoken ideal of masculinity. Be tough, be strong, don't show weakness. It was a constant, low-grade pressure that I had just accepted as part of being a boy. But Leah, she didn't have to be any of those things. Her softness was her strength. Her presumed shyness was part of her charm. Looking at her, I felt a sense of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It felt safe. For the rest of the evening, I stayed in character. I wore the clothes, the wig, the makeup. I practiced my walk, my voice, and with each passing hour, it felt less like a costume and more like a possibility. I started to think of the person in the mirror not as me in a dress, but simply as Leah and Leo, the boy in the unpacked bedroom. Began to feel more and more like a role I used to play. A seed had been planted, and in the strange, fertile ground of my insecurity and loneliness, it was beginning to sprout. The morning air was cool and crisp, a perfect late summer morning, but I couldn't feel it. All I could feel was the frantic, hummingbird-like beating of my heart against the tight band of my bra. I was standing by the front door, my hand on the cold brass knob, completely frozen. Today was the day. Today. I wasn't just Leah in the safety of our house. I had to be Leah in the real world, in the lion's den of Northwood High. I was wearing a simple dark green A-line skirt, a cream-colored short-sleeved top, and the same ankle boots from my first fitting. Maya had kept my makeup light and natural, the new girl from the city who doesn't try too hard look. She called it, the wig was brushed and shiny, and a single silver necklace rested in the hollow of my throat. Objectively, I looked good. I looked like a normal teenage girl. But I didn't feel normal. I felt like an imposter, a spy on the verge of having his cover blown. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to run back to my room, rip off the wig and the clothes, and hide under the covers until this whole insane week was over. Maya came up behind me, carrying both our backpacks. She put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Breathe, Leo," she whispered, using my real name for the first time all morning. It sounded jarring. "You look perfect. No one will ever know. Just stick to the script. You're Leah, you're shy. You let me do most of the talking." I looked at my reflection in the glass panel of the door. A nervous-looking girl with wide, frightened eyes stared back. What if someone finds out my voice was a thin, reedy thing, the practiced softness now laced with genuine fear? What if I do something wrong? What if I walk weird or my voice drops? "It won't," she said with a confidence I couldn't begin to fathom. "You've been practicing for days. It's muscle memory now. We walk in, we get your class schedule from the office, and we go to homeroom. Simple. I'll be right next to you the entire time." I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath that did nothing to calm my racing pulse, and opened the door. The moment I stepped outside, a light breeze rustled the leaves in the trees and lifted the hem of my skirt. The sensation of cool air on my legs, which were only covered by a thin layer of nylon, was so startlingly real, so public. This wasn't a rehearsal anymore. The drive to school was a silent, tense blur. When we pulled into the student parking lot, the reality of it all hit me like a physical blow. The lot was filled with hundreds of students, all laughing, talking, and yelling. They all knew each other. They all belonged. We were the outsiders, or rather, I was the outsider in more ways than one. "Ready?" Maya asked, turning off the engine. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The moment we stepped out of the car and started walking toward the main entrance, I felt it. A change in the atmosphere. Heads turned, conversations lulled, eyes followed us. At first, I thought they were looking at Maya. She was pretty and confident, the kind of girl who naturally drew attention. But then I realized they weren't looking at her. They were looking past her, at me, at Leah. A low murmur rippled through the groups we passed. I could feel their gazes on me like spotlights, analyzing my clothes, my hair, my face. It was the exact opposite of the invisibility I was used to. It was intense, suffocating scrutiny. My legs, encased in the sheer stockings, felt weak and shaky. I was sure that every step I took was a clumsy, masculine stomp that would give me away. I focused on Maya's advice: short steps, light on your feet. As we walked through the main doors, the noise of the hallway washed over us. It was a chaotic symphony of slamming lockers, shouting, and laughter. And through it all, the stairs continued. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, letting my long hair act as a curtain, hiding my face. I could feel a hot blush creeping up my neck, a telltale sign of my panic. We were heading toward the administration office when a voice cut through the noise. "Hey, Maya, didn't know you were bringing a friend on the first day." I froze. Maya stopped, turning with a practiced, easy smile. I risked a glance up from under my curtain of hair. Walking toward us was a guy who looked like he'd been ripped straight from a high school movie cliché. He was tall, with broad shoulders, an easy, confident grin, and sun-streaked blonde hair. He wore a Northwood High football jacket, and he moved with the unthinking grace of a natural athlete. "Hey, Jake," Maya said, her voice bright and friendly. "How was your summer?" "It was good. All football. You know how it is," he said. But his eyes weren't on Maya. They were fixed on me. They were a friendly, curious blue. But his direct gaze made my stomach do a nervous flip. "So are you going to introduce me?" Maya put a casual, protective arm around my shoulders. "Jake, this is my cousin, Leah. She's staying with us for a while. Leah, this is Jake." Jake's smile widened. He stepped closer, and my first instinct was to step back. But Maya's arm held me in place. "Leah, that's a pretty name," he said, new to Northwood. I could only manage a small, jerky nod. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was afraid he could hear it. This was the first test, the first time I had to speak to a stranger. A guy, as Leah. "She's a little shy," Maya supplied smoothly, giving my shoulder a gentle squeeze. I'm from Chicago," I managed to squeak out. My voice came out higher and softer than I'd intended, more of a breathy whisper. Jake's smile didn't falter. He seemed to find my shyness endearing. "Chicago, wow, big change from a small town like this. Well, welcome to Northwood. Leah, if you need anyone to show you around, you know who to ask." His gaze was warm and maybe a little too lingering. It traveled from my eyes down to my mouth, and I felt the sticky gloss on my lips as if it were melting under a magnifying glass. The school bell rang then, a shrill, jarring sound that saved me. "We've got to get her schedule," Maya said, already pulling me away. "See you around, Jake." "Definitely," he called after us. As we walked away, my entire body was buzzing. I'd survived, but the encounter had left me feeling deeply unsettled. The way Jake had looked at me, spoken to me. No guy had ever looked at me like that before. He wasn't seeing a competitor or another guy. He was seeing a girl while he found attractive, and my body's reaction, the racing heart, The heat rising in my cheeks, the dizzying feeling in my stomach. It wasn't a reaction I was familiar with. It was terrifying and, in a way, I couldn't possibly admit, a little bit thrilling. The rest of the morning passed in a tense, nervous haze. In every class, I was the subject of curious glances and whispered conversations. I sat in the back, kept my head down, and let Maya handle any introductions. But I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The feeling was strongest in our third period English class. That's where I first met Brianna. She was what you'd call a queen bee, surrounded by a small court of look-alike girls. She had perfectly straight, platinum blonde hair, sharp, intelligent eyes, and a way of looking at you that felt less like an introduction and more like an interrogation. She and her friends approached our desk just before the bell rang. "So, you're the new cousin," Brianna said, her voice dripping with a kind of bored skepticism. She didn't look at Maya. Her focus was entirely on me. She scanned me from my boots to my hair, and her eyes, unlike Jake's, were not warm. They were cold and calculating. "Brianna, this is Leah," Maya said, her tone a little cooler than it had been with Jake. "Leah," Brianna repeated, tasting the name. "You look familiar. Have we met?" My blood ran cold. I don't think so," I stammered. "I just got here from Chicago." Brianna's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched slightly. "Chicago. Right, that's what I heard." She leaned in a little closer, and I could smell her expensive, floral perfume. "It's just, Maya's posted 1,000,000 pictures of her family from Chicago, and I've never seen you in any of them." It was a direct hit, a well-aimed missile designed to crack my flimsy cover story. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. My mind went completely blank. Maya, ever the strategist, jumped in without missing a beat. "That's because Leah's from my aunt's side of the family, the side that hates social media. You know how it is." Her tone was light and breezy, but I could feel the tension in her. Brianna didn't look convinced. She gave me one last, long, piercing look before turning away as the teacher started the class. "Well," she said over her shoulder, "welcome to Northwood." It didn't sound like a welcome. It sounded like a threat. For the rest of the class, I could feel her eyes on me. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that she was not going to let this go. Jake's attention was confusing and flattering. Brianna's was just plain dangerous. The biggest, most practical hurdle of the day was one I hadn't even considered until the need became urgent: the bathroom. During the lunch break, I realized I couldn't avoid it any longer, but the thought of walking into the girls' restroom sent a jolt of pure terror through me. It felt like the ultimate transgression, a place where I would be instantly exposed. I tugged on Maya's sleeve, my eyes wide with panic. "I have to." "You know," I whispered, my voice trembling. "But I can't. I can't go in there." Maya's face softened with understanding. She immediately sized up the situation. Okay, don't panic. Follow me." She led me away from the crowded cafeteria, down a less traveled hallway near the back of the school, to the nurse's office. The nurse, a kind-looking older woman, was on the phone. Maya scribbled a quick note on a piece of paper. "My cousin is new, feeling overwhelmed, needs a quiet place for a minute," and showed it to the nurse, who simply nodded and pointed to a small, private, single-stall restroom attached to her office. As I closed the door behind me, the lock clicking shut, I sagged against it in relief. The silence of the small room was a blessed relief after the chaos of the hallways. As I looked at my reflection in the small mirror over the sink, I saw the strain on Leah's face. There were faint lines of worry around her eyes, and her lip gloss was slightly chewed off. This was so much harder than I'd imagined. It wasn't just about the clothes and the voice. It was a constant, high-wire act of vigilance, of thinking about every single move, every word, every gesture. It was exhausting. When I came out, Maya was waiting for me. "Better?" she asked softly. I just nodded, still shaken. As we walked back toward the cafeteria, she did something unexpected. She reached out and gently took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. Her hand was warm and strong. "You're doing great. You know," she said, her voice low so only I could hear. "It's the hardest day. It'll get easier from here." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. In that moment, she wasn't my director or my coach. She was my sister. And in that crowded, intimidating hallway, being led by the hand, being protected, being looked after, it felt strangely comforting. It was a feeling of being cared for in a way that felt distinctly different from how I'd ever been treated as a boy. It was a vulnerability that wasn't weakness. And in the midst of all the fear and anxiety, that feeling, Cal, it made my heart soften just a little bit. The first day was a trial by fire, but Maya was right. The days that followed got easier, dangerously so. The initial, sharp-edged panic began to dull into a constant, low-level hum of alertness. The mechanics of being Leah started to become second nature. I stopped thinking about how to walk. My body just naturally adopted the shorter, lighter stride. I'd sit down in the cafeteria and cross my legs without a conscious thought, sometimes. When Maya and I were at home, just talking in the kitchen, I'd catch myself using Leah's softer, higher voice, only realizing it when my sister gave me a strange look. The transformation was becoming more than just skin deep. It was seeping inward. My body itself was changing in subtle ways. The constant skincare routine Maya had forced on me was actually working. My skin, which used to be prone to breakouts, was clearer and softer than it had ever been. My hands, thanks to the lotion she made me use every night, were no longer rough and calloused from years of gripping game controllers. My eyes, free from the harsh glare of a computer screen and softened by a hint of mascara, seemed gentler. I was living in Leah's body, and her body was, in turn, shaping me. I felt lighter, not just physically, from the different clothes, but emotionally. The heavy, armored posture of being a teenage boy, the slouched shoulders, the guarded expressions was being replaced by Leah's open, if shy, demeanor. There was a strange grace in it, a lack of the constant, unspoken pressure to be tough and assertive. One afternoon, I was doing homework at the dining room table, still dressed as Leah. I'd gotten so used to the clothes that changing back into my old jeans and hoodies felt like putting on a stiff, uncomfortable costume. I brushed a strand of the wig's hair away from my face, the gesture fluid and unthinking. My mom walked into the room, stopped, and just stared at me for a moment. "You know," she said, a small puzzled smile on her face. "It's amazing. You even look more like your sister now." The comment hit me with the force of a physical shock. The line between Leo and Leah wasn't just blurring for me. It was blurring for the people around me, too. Jake's attention, which had been so startling on the first day, quickly became a regular feature of my school life. He made it a point to find me between classes, always with that easy, handsome smile. He'd lean against the lockers next to me, his presence warm and solid, and ask me how my day was going. "Hey, Leah," he'd say, his voice a low, friendly rumble. "Surviving Northwood so far?" "It's okay," I'd murmur, my eyes fixed on my textbooks. He wasn't pushy or overly aggressive. He was just present and charming. He'd tell me funny stories about his football coach, ask me questions about Chicago, and always seemed genuinely interested in my shy, One-word answers. He was treating me with a kind of gentle consideration I'd never experienced before. He'd walk on the hallway side to shield me from the jostling crowds, or notice if I was struggling with my books and offer to carry them. Then, he started texting me. It began with a simple, "Hey, it's Jake from school. Maya gave me your number. Hope that's okay." My heart did a painful lurch when I saw the message. Maya, the master manipulator, had clearly given it to him on purpose. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on a simple, "Hi, it's okay." From there, the messages became a nightly routine. He'd ask about my homework, what I thought of our teachers, what kind of music I liked. The anonymity of texting made it easier. I could be a little more open, a little funnier. I could craft Leah's personality one carefully chosen emoji at a time. One evening, after a particularly long day, he and a few friends offered to give Maya and me a ride home from a study session at the library. When we got to his big, slightly beat-up truck, he walked around to my side and opened the passenger door for me before I could even reach for the handle. "Here you go," he said, smiling down at me. As I climbed in, my skirt riding up just a little, I felt my cheeks flush a deep, uncontrollable red. The heat spread through my entire body. It was such a small, chivalrous gesture, but it felt monumental. It was an acknowledgement, a statement: you are a girl, and I will treat you as such. In that moment, lying was the furthest thing from my mind. The feeling was just nice. It was intoxicatingly, terrifyingly nice. The fantasy of being Leah was starting to feel better than the reality of being Leo. And that thought, more than anything else, filled me with a profound sense of dread. Maya, the architect of this entire charade, was the first one to notice that her creation was getting out of hand. She had wanted to make a splash, to get us noticed. The plan was working better than she could have imagined. We were invited to sit at the popular kids' table at lunch. We got nods and hellos in the hallways. Maya was thriving, easily chatting and laughing with our new circle of acquaintances. But she started watching me with a worried, calculating look in her eyes. One night, I was sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone and smiling at a dumb meme Jake had sent me. I was still in my Leah clothes, a pair of soft leggings and an oversized sweater. Maya leaned against the doorframe of my room. "You know, you can change out of that stuff now," she said, her tone carefully casual. "You don't have to be her 24/7. I looked up from my phone, my smile fading. "It's just comfortable," I mumbled, which was true. The soft, stretchy fabrics felt much better than my stiff denim jeans. "Is it?" she asked, her gaze sharpening. "Or are you starting to like it a little too much? You were blushing a mile a minute when Jake opened the car door for you today." I felt a defensive heat rise in my cheeks again. I was not, I lied. "Leo, come on. I know you," she said, stepping into the room. Her voice was serious now. This was supposed to be a game, a one-week project. "Don't forget who you are underneath all of this." She gestured vaguely at my wig, which was resting on a styrofoam head on my dresser. I fell silent. A part of me, the old Leo, knew she was right. This was all temporary. It was all a lie. But another part of me, the part that was starting to think and feel like Leah, felt a sharp sting of resentment. She didn't understand. She didn't know what it felt like to be seen, to be appreciated, to be pretty. "I know what this is," I said quietly, looking down at my phone. "Do you?" she pressed. "Because you seem to be enjoying the attention from Jake. What happens at the end of the week when Leah has to go back to Chicago? What are you going to do then?" I didn't have an answer. The thought of it, of Leah just disappearing, left a hollow, aching feeling in my chest that I didn't want to examine too closely. The week was almost over, and for the first time, the thought of it ending didn't bring relief. It brought panic. While Jake was pulling me deeper into the fantasy, Brianna was relentlessly trying to tear it down. She was like a quiet, patient predator, always watching from the sidelines. She never confronted me directly again, but her suspicion was a constant, oppressive presence. I'd catch her staring at me in the lunch line. Her eyes narrowed as I picked at a salad. She'd accidentally bump into me in the hall, her eyes flicking down to my hands, my feet, my Adam's apple, which, thankfully, was still small enough to be easily hidden by a choker or a high-collared shirt. She started asking Maya seemingly innocent questions, but they were all traps. "Does Leah play any sports?" she asked one day at lunch. "I bet she was a cheerleader in Chicago." "Oh no, she's not really the athletic type," Maya had answered smoothly, "more into art and books." Another time, she brought up an old photo she'd found on Maya's mom's Facebook page. "I saw this picture of your family at the lake a few summers ago. I didn't see Leah there." She was at summer camp that year. Maya had lied, quick as a whip. Each question was a test, a probe searching for a weakness in our story. I started having nightmares about it, dreaming that my wig would fall off in the middle of the hallway, or that my voice would suddenly drop to its normal register while talking to Jake. The fear of exposure was a constant, bitter taste in my mouth, a stark contrast to the sweet fantasy I was living. The breaking point came on Thursday night, the 5th day of the experiment. I had just gotten out of the shower. I stood in front of the steamy bathroom mirror, a towel wrapped around my waist. My hair was wet and slicked back, and without the wig, makeup, and clothes, I was just me, just Leo. But as I wiped the steam from the glass, the face looking back at me felt like a stranger. I saw the newly shaped eyebrows, the smooth, clear skin. I saw the familiar features of my own face, but they seemed empty. They felt like a mask I was no longer used to wearing. The boy in the mirror looked plain, awkward, and profoundly lonely. He looked invisible. My hand came up, my fingers trembling slightly as they touched the cool surface of the mirror, tracing the outline of the face I was supposed to recognize as my own. And I whispered a name, my voice cracking with a confusion so deep it felt like it was splitting me in two. Leah. The question hung in the quiet, steamy air. Who was I? Was I the boy in the mirror, or the girl he had been pretending to be? The role had become so intertwined with my reality that I couldn't find the line between them anymore. And the most terrifying realization of all was that I wasn't sure which one I wanted to be. I was afraid of being discovered, but I was even more afraid of having to go back to being just Leo. Friday night, the biggest football game of the season, Northwood High versus our arch rivals, the Westwood Warriors, under the bright, buzzing stadium lights. The entire town would be there. It was the social event of the fall, a place to see and be seen. And it was the last place on earth I wanted to be. My plan was simple: feign a headache, a stomach ache, a sudden onset of the bubonic plague, whatever it took to stay home. Locked in my room, the idea of navigating that massive, chaotic crowd, of being under so many watchful eyes, was more than I could handle. The pressure of the past week had worn me down to a raw nerve. But Maya, of course, would have none of it. She found me huddled on my bed, already trying to sell my "I think I have a fever" story. She wasn't buying it. She stood there, her hands on her hips, her expression a mix of sympathy and steely resolve. "You can't stay home. Leo, you have to go." Why, I pleaded. "It's the last night. Can't Leah just be sick?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Because if Leah, the shy new girl who never misses a thing, suddenly bails on the biggest social event of the week. Who do you think is going to be the first person to notice Brianna? Her suspicion meter will go off the charts. She'll see it as a sign of weakness, an admission that something is wrong. We have to see this through to the end. One last night, we go. We show our faces. We cheer for the team. And then tomorrow, Leah gets a call from home and has to suddenly go back to Chicago. It's the perfect ending. Her logic was, as always, infuriatingly sound. A no-show would be more suspicious than anything else. I was trapped. She must have seen the look of utter despair on my face because her voice softened. She came and sat on the edge of the bed beside me. "Hey," she said, touching my arm. "It's going to be okay. I'll be with you. We'll stay for an hour, maybe 2, and then we'll leave. I promise." She gave me a weak smile. "Besides, I already picked out the perfect outfit for you." With a heavy heart, I resigned myself to my fate. She led me to her room. Where the outfit was laid out, it was more what matured than my school clothes. A simple, form-fitting black dress that ended just above the knee, made of a soft, stretchy material. Paired with it was a cozy white cardigan to ward off the evening chill, a pair of sheer black stockings, and the same ankle boots. As I got dressed, the familiar ritual felt different tonight. There was a sense of finality to it, pulling on the soft dress, feeling it hug my body. I knew this was the last time I would be Leah. She had chosen a bolder makeup look for the evening, to a slightly darker shade on my eyelids and a touch of soft red lipstick that made my mouth look fuller. When I looked in the mirror, I saw Leah ready for her final performance. She looked beautiful. She looked confident and alluring in a way that the shy, sweet schoolgirl hadn't. And seeing her, knowing she was about to disappear forever, I felt a pang of grief so sharp and real it took my breath away. I wasn't just saying goodbye to a costume. I was saying goodbye to a part of myself I was just starting to know. The stadium was a roaring beast of light and sound. The floodlights bleached the green field to an almost surreal color, and the roar of the crowd was a physical force, vibrating through the metal bleachers and up into my chest. My heartbeat immediately synced with the frantic pounding rhythm of the school band's drums. The cool night air was a shock after the warmth of the house. It whispered against the bare skin of my arms and slipped under the hem of my dress, raising goosebumps on my legs. I instinctively pulled the cardigan tighter around myself, my fingers clenching the soft, knitted fabric. Thousands of eyes. That's what it felt like. Everywhere I looked. There were people, students, parents, teachers, all packed together, their faces turned toward the field. But I felt like their collective gaze was a tangible thing, a weight pressing down on me from all sides. Every person who glanced our way felt like a potential threat, someone who might see the truth beneath the carefully constructed illusion. "Just smile and act like you're having fun," Maya murmured in my ear over the din of a cheerleader's chant. I tried, but I'm sure the smile on my face was a brittle, terrified grimace. We found a spot in the student section, a chaotic sea of faces painted in our school colors. We had just settled in when I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Jake. His face was illuminated by the harsh stadium lights, but his smile was as warm and easy as ever. "I was hoping I'd see you here," he shouted over the noise. He looked different out of his school jacket. He was wearing a simple gray hoodie, but it did nothing to hide the breadth of his shoulders. Tonight, he seemed to have eyes only for me. "We almost didn't come," Maya yelled back. Ever the social director? Leah was feeling a little under the weather. Jake's expression immediately filled with concern. He leaned closer to me, his voice dropping so that I had to strain to hear him. Are you okay? You shouldn't have come if you're not feeling well." His proximity was overwhelming. I was standing on a slightly higher bleacher, which put us almost at eye level. We were so close I could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his deodorant mixed with something woody, like sandalwood. It was a distinctly masculine scent, and it made my head spin. I'm fine," I managed to say, my voice breathy. My ears were burning hot. "You look," he started, his eyes doing a quick, appreciative sweep of my outfit. "You look amazing, Leah, really." He gently took my arm, his fingers warm against my skin, even through the sleeve of my cardigan, and guided me to a slightly less crowded spot near the edge of the bleachers. "It's quieter here," he said. We stood there for a moment in a strange, intimate bubble amidst the surrounding chaos. The roar of the crowd faded to a dull background hum. It was just the two of us, standing close, the energy between us a palpable, crackling thing. This was it. This was the peak of the fantasy, the moment that felt so dangerously, beautifully real. The girl inside me, Leah, was soaring. The boy, Leo, was screaming in silent terror. And then the bubble burst. A new voice, sharp and cold as ice, cut through the air. Well, isn't this a cozy little scene?" We both turned. Brianna was standing there, her arms crossed, a smug, triumphant smile on her face. Her two friends stood behind her like loyal sentinels. Her eyes, however, weren't smiling. They were as sharp and pointed as daggers. "Brianna," Jake said, his tone shifting from warm to wary. He instinctively took a small step in front of me, a protective gesture that made my heart ache. "What do you want?" "Oh, nothing from you, Jake," she said, her eyes never leaving me. "I just came to say hello to Leah, and to tell her that I've finally figured it out. I've solved the big mystery." The air grew thick and heavy. A few people nearby had noticed the confrontation and were starting to watch. Their curiosity piqued. "What are you talking about?" Maya demanded, stepping up beside me, her protective instincts on full display. Brianna ignored her completely. She took a slow, deliberate step toward me. "I knew you looked familiar from the first moment I saw you," she said, her voice low and steady, but loud enough for those around us to hear. I couldn't place it, so I did some digging. I found Maya's brother's old middle school yearbook online. It took some effort, but it was worth it. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I couldn't breathe. My lungs had seized up. This was it. The nightmare was coming true. "The thing is," Brianna continued, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction, "I know your family's history. You don't have a female cousin named Leah from Chicago. Your aunt only has one kid, a son." She paused for dramatic effect, letting her words hang in the air. Then she looked directly into my wide, terrified eyes. "There is no Leah." Jake turned to look at her, confused. "Brianna, what is this? Just leave her alone." But Brianna was relentless. She took one more step, invading my personal space, her face just inches from mine. She delivered the final fatal blow, her voice ringing out with absolute certainty. "Because Leah is actually Leo, Maya's little brother, all dressed up like a girl." Silence. For a single horrifying moment, the entire stadium seemed to fall silent. The roar of the crowd, the blast of the band's horns, the shouts of the players on the field, it all vanished. The only sound was the frantic, panicked drumming of my own blood in my ears. The world had stopped turning. I was frozen, a statue in a black dress and a white cardigan, trapped under the merciless glare of the stadium lights. My mind was a complete blank, a white void of pure, unadulterated terror. The soft red lipstick on my mouth felt like it had hardened into cement, sealing my lips shut. My fingers, which had been nervously twisting the hem of my dress, were now clenched so tightly that my knuckles were white. I could feel the thin fabric of the stocking straining against my shaking legs. I saw Maya's face, her confident mask shattered, her eyes wide with shock and fear. But my gaze was locked on Jake. I watched as his face went through a rapid, sickening series of emotions. First, confusion, as he tried to process Brianna's absurd words. Then, a flicker of disbelief. He looked at Brianna, then back at me. His eyes, the same warm blue eyes that had been looking at me with such affection just moments before, now narrowed with a dawning, horrified suspicion. His gaze dropped from my eyes, past my carefully made-up face, down to my chest, where the padded bra created a soft, false curve under my dress. He stared at that spot for a second, and in that second, I saw everything click into place in his mind. The pieces of the puzzle, my shyness, my soft voice, my reluctance to get too close, all reassembled themselves into a new grotesque picture. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a look of confusion, betrayal, and then a chilling wave of disgust. He took a step back. One small, almost imperceptible step. But it was enough to shatter my entire world. No one spoke. No one moved. The moment stretched into an eternity, heavy and suffocating. I stood there, exposed, the lie stripped away, leaving only the raw, terrified boy underneath. The character of Leah dissolved under the harsh lights, and for the first time in a week, I was just Leo, a boy in a dress, facing a consequence I could never have imagined.